Bro, groceries used to be boring, and now they feel like luxury goods. Haha, I swear eggs are acting like a startup IPO. And the annoying part is you cannot just skip food, right? Rent can wait. Bread absolutely cannot. That is exactly why price jumps hit so hard. If a family spends half their income on food, even small hikes wreck them. That used to be normal for most of history. Wait, most of history? Yeah, people were grinding just to stay fed. We really built civilization so we could buy more expensive tomatoes. Haha, that is the most depressing progress report ever. But why did food get cheaper for so long, then suddenly snap back up? Because the whole system got insanely efficient. Efficient in that very unsexy way nobody notices? Exactly, like pallets and barcodes saving civilization. Nothing gets the pulse racing like standardized screw sizes. No, but seriously, those tiny details matter everywhere. One container can move from ship to train to truck with less friction. And then suddenly everything becomes cheaper to move, right? Cheaper, faster, more predictable, and way more global. Until the whole thing hits one weak link. Exactly, and food has a million weak links. That is the part people miss, because food sounds simple. It is not simple at all. It is a chain of chaos. Chaos, but with branding and refrigerated trucks. So where does the fragility actually start? Farms, weather, labor, transport, storage, all of it. One drought and suddenly the whole math changes. One war too, which is wild. Yeah, war, tariffs, fuel spikes, port delays, labor shortages. That is a lot of ways to break a sandwich. Literally a geopolitical sandwich. And every step adds cost before it even reaches the shelf. Exactly. And if one step gets expensive, everybody downstream feels it. But the weird part is, companies are still posting huge profits. That is the part that makes people angry. Right, because people hear inflation and think nobody is winning. Except apparently the people selling the pasta. Or the people selling the eggs, or the bread, or the ketchup. So are they just passing costs through, honestly? Some of it, yes. But some of it is pricing power. Pricing power sounds like the nice corporate version of because we can. That is exactly what it sounds like. When a few big firms dominate food categories, they can hold prices up. Because consumers cannot really just boycott dinner. Imagine a hunger strike against your own grocery bill. That is not a consumer choice. That is a hostage situation. And that gives companies room to keep margins fat. Margins fat while shoppers are looking at $12 of receipt sadness. Receipt sadness is real, honestly. The receipt is always worse than the cart looked. Because the cart lies, the receipt tells the truth. Okay, but why food specifically feels so vulnerable? Because it spoils, it needs cold storage, and it moves constantly. So a broken truck route is not a small issue. No, it is a cost bomb. And then refrigeration, warehouses, fuel, labor, all stack up. Exactly, and every layer has its own shock absorber price. Shock absorber price is such a good phrase. Thank you, I should not be proud of that. The scary thing is how fast one shock spreads globally now. Because everything is connected through the same system? Yes, and that connection is both the miracle and the trap. That sounds almost too neat. It is neat until you remember brittle systems break loudly. Like a perfectly organized closet collapsing on your foot. Yes, and groceries are the closet now. So the old idea was, make trade smoother and everyone wins. Basically, yeah, and it worked for a long time. Then why does it feel like the bill landed on regular people? Because efficiency does not automatically mean fairness. There it is, the corporate loophole in one sentence. Efficiency is the spreadsheet. Fairness is the argument afterwards. And companies are very good at protecting the spreadsheet, even when the public feels squeezed from every side. Especially then, because demand for food never really disappears. People are weirdly attached to eating, astonishing consumer loyalty. And that loyalty gives the system a lot of room to charge more. So if prices stay high, is it only because costs stayed high? Not only no. And that is the uncomfortable part. Because profits are high even after costs normalize? That is what makes people suspect companies are using the moment. Crisis pricing is one ugly phrase, but it fits. And once shoppers accept a new price, it never really goes back. That is the depressing part. Welcome to the permanent temporary increase. That phrase should be illegal. Do you think people notice more because groceries happen every week? Absolutely. You feel it constantly, not once a year. Unlike, say, buying a car or a phone. Right, food is the one bill you cannot escape, which makes the whole thing feel personal, not abstract. Yeah, it hits the kitchen, not a chart. And maybe that is why people are so fed up, because they can literally see the system failing at checkout? Exactly. The receipt is the evidence. The receipt has become a political document. And honestly, that is not even an exaggeration. If you had to sum it up, it is not one cause, right? No, it is weather, war, logistics, labor, and corporate behavior. The full chaos stack. The full chaos stack, yes. And the worst part is, those shocks keep arriving in waves. So the system never really gets a chance to breathe. Exactly. It keeps getting kicked while it is already bent. That is such a bleak way to describe lunch, but accurate. The crazy thing is, people still think groceries should just be stable, because for a while they were stable enough to trust. And now that trust is gone at the checkout line. Pretty much, yeah. Nothing radical happens faster than someone seeing butter priced like gold. Butter is the ultimate betrayal. Honestly, the whole thing makes me wonder what other everyday stuff is this fragile. Probably more than we want to admit. Yeah, and that is the unsettling lesson here. The grocery aisle looks normal until it absolutely does not. Should we just accept that food is now a stress test? I mean, we should at least stop pretending it is random. Random would be more comforting, honestly. Way more comforting, yeah. But if the system is fragile and the profits are huge, people will keep asking questions. And they should, because this is everybody's pantry. Exactly. Nobody gets to opt out of dinner. All right, that line is going in the episode title somehow. Exactly. And dinner is where the pain actually becomes real. Nobody argues with a receipt like they argue with a stock chart. That is why grocery inflation feels personal, not abstract. Your rent can be theoretical for a month, but eggs are right there. Eggs are basically the unpaid intern of the economy. They do everything, and everyone still acts surprised when they get expensive. And the weird part is, this was supposed to get easier over time. That was the whole promise of modern food systems, right? More efficient, more standardized, cheaper logistics, all that. We invented barcodes and somehow still made tomatoes dramatic. Tomatoes are always one weather report away from a crisis. But that's the point. The system is efficient until it is not. One drought, one war, one labor shortage, and suddenly the whole chain shivers. And food cannot just wait politely in a warehouse forever. It spoils, it rots, it needs cold storage, fuel, hands, timing. That's why a tiny disruption becomes a giant grocery bill. Exactly, because every step has a cost layered on top of the last one. Farming, processing, packaging, trucking, refrigeration, shelf space. By the time you buy cereal, it has had a whole corporate coming-of-age story. Ha ha ha, that is annoyingly true, and somehow the cereal still tastes like cardboard. Wait, let's stay on that supply chain thing for a second. The whole miracle is built on everything arriving exactly on time, which means it only takes one missing truck driver to make the system ugly. Or one port delay, one fuel spike, one tariff, one strike. It is almost ridiculous how many ways dinner can get more expensive. The universe really said, let's make lunch annoying. Ha ha ha! Lunch is catching strays now, wow! And then people look at the shelf and blame the store like it personally did this. But the store is also just one more actor in a huge chain. Right, and that chain has a lot of concentrated power at the top, which is where the corporate profits part gets spicy. Because record profits during grocery pain is not a good look. If everyone is suffering and the giants are thriving, people notice. The question is whether they're just passing through costs or shaping them. My guess is they are not sitting there in a monastery of restraint. Ha ha ha! Yeah, nobody in a boardroom is saying, let's make less money this quarter. That's the incentive problem in a nutshell. If demand is sticky and people still need to eat, prices can drift up fast. And if a few companies control a lot of the market, they have room. Not infinite room, but enough room to matter. Enough room that a family feels it at checkout every single week. That weekly hit is what makes people angry, not the macro chart. Nobody's like, wow, fascinating CPI movement while crying over butter. Ha ha ha! Butter is out here becoming a luxury mood. And that is the thing. Food used to eat a massive chunk of income. In the old days, people were spending most of what they made just to eat. Then industrialization and trade made food cheaper for a long time. So now when it reverses, it feels like history is being rude. Ha ha ha! History is always rude, honestly. But there is another twist here, which is that the system got optimized for speed, not resilience. We made it lean, just in time, beautifully efficient, and kind of brittle. So the moment something breaks, there is no cushion. Exactly. No fat, no backup, no slack. Even the food system got on a startup diet. Ha ha ha! Bro, that is so accurate it hurts. And startup diets are great until one thing catches fire. Which in food can mean a drought, a disease, or a war. Or just a bunch of little shortages all at once. And once prices go up, they do not always come back down cleanly. Especially if everyone gets used to the higher number. That's the part people hate hearing because it sounds too cynical. But firms love sticky prices when they can get them. Sticky up is a lot easier than sticky down. Truly the economics version of gravity. Once things go up, suddenly nobody remembers the lower floor existed. And when the public says, why is this happening? The answer is messy on purpose. Because there is no single villain, just a bunch of incentives lining up badly. Producers want margins, processors want margins, shippers want margins. Retailers want to protect their own margin too. Everybody wants to eat, except the person actually buying the groceries. Ha ha ha! That is brutally well put. And because food is essential, people absorb a lot before they can cut back. You can skip a trip, buy less fancy stuff, switch brands. But you cannot stop feeding your family. That inelastic demand is basically a pressure cooker. Yeah, and a pressure cooker with a few huge corporate valves on top, which makes the profit story impossible to ignore. If margins widen while households get squeezed, people start asking about power. Not just pricing power. Who can raise prices? Who can wait? Who can absorb shocks? Those are different players in the chain, and some are way stronger than others. The lettuce does not have negotiating leverage, sadly. Lettuce as a union is not exactly a strong concept, but the companies around the lettuce absolutely do. And that is why grocery prices are not just about weather or money printing or whatever. It is also about structure, concentration, and who gets to decide. Which is a very unsexy answer to a very sexy pain. Pain is never sexy, but it sure is memorable. The weird thing is, we all act shocked when the system works exactly like incentives say it will. Like, what did we think a global food chain would do under stress? Become emotionally stable? No supply chain has ever been emotionally stable. It is this giant machine moving calories across the planet with tiny margins. Then one shock hits and everybody discovers how connected everything is, and how little slack we built into the system. That slack is what makes life feel normal. Without it, every checkout becomes a tiny alarm bell. So maybe the real question is not why groceries got expensive. It is why we built something this fragile and called it efficient. That is the most civilized disaster I have heard today. And honestly, that is what makes it worth talking about. Because everybody has to eat again tomorrow. And tomorrow's price matters just as much as today's.